One, and we are recording with the one and only Dr. Peter McCullough on Friday, January 20th, 2023 at 3:02 p.m. Eastern time. Who he just asked, Dr. McCullough just asked me, what are we streaming to, YouTube or Rumble? And I had to remind him I'm not on YouTube, thanks to a name that rhymes with Schmieder Schmishkola. But I don't regret it. As a matter of fact, I love it. I think it's giving me street cred. Dr. McCullough's been on here several times before. He's the most published cardiorenal physician in world history. His book, The Courage to Face COVID-19, with his co-author John Leake, will be in the description, as well as his Twitter, Getter, Gab, Truth, all that good stuff, as well as his website and his Substack. But out of the 1,062 episodes I've done, the one we did on Weber Shandwick is actually my fifth most downloaded episode of all time, which to me it's always fascinating because those numbers don't lie. And I think that's what people want to hear about more. And seeing as how in that episode we only barely touched on it, I figured we would maybe flesh it out a little more. And as you are a walking encyclopedia with all of the receipts, what better man than yourself? So, Dr. McCullough, please take it away.
Tommy, thanks so much for having me on the program. I'm going to pull up the South by Southwest SXSW 2023 program. And this one got people suspicious of something going on. So South by Southwest it's a entertainment, IT, high-tech festival in Austin, Texas. They have music and all the big figures that you see in the high-tech social media world. Of interest, last year I was banned from South by Southwest. Banned. I couldn't walk into a South by Southwest event. And also on the banned list was Joe Rogan. Joe was banned, and that's because Joe and I went on his show back on December 8th of 2021, and South by Southwest was in March of 2022. Now, South by Southwest, Tommy, March 13th, 2023, listen to this. There's a section called When Doctors Prescribe Misinformation. It says, do right and wrong answers still exist in medicine? Social platforms struggle to make policies about users losing platform privileges when spreading harmful misinformation. But what about the role of medical institutions in determining whether doctors who are spreading false medical information should face disciplinary action based on the harm to patients? Richard Barron, Wasim Khalid, and Vineet Arora unpack the role of institutions in tackling medical information and how to think about measuring harm. So this is interesting now because in this a billboard previously, there was Ali Mohsen, who was the vice president of digital health for Weber Shandwick. She's been replaced now by Vineet Arora from University of Chicago. In the middle is Richard Barron from the American Board of Internal Medicine. That's worrisome. And then lastly is still Wasim Khalid of Blackbird AI. Blackbird AI is an artificial intelligence company that had a contract with Weber Shandwick. The reason why I'm bringing all this up is people want to know, who is Weber Shandwick? Weber Shandwick is the PR and marketing firm for Pfizer and Moderna. They've had a long-standing contract with Pfizer, and they've picked up a contract with Moderna. They're part of the IPG group. It's one of the world's largest marketing consortiums. We're talking, this is a big firm. And what was learned is that the American Board of Internal Medicine was colluding with Weber Shandwick, and it came up on this billboard in South by Southwest. And people started looking, hey, what does the American Board of Internal Medicine have to do with the PR and marketing firm for Pfizer, Moderna, and misinformation? And this came up as myself and other doctors were being hunted by this board for credentialing as they were accusing us of spreading misinformation. And then, but we realized, wait a minute, they're working with an AI firm and with a marketing firm for Pfizer and Moderna. This went all the way to Senator Rand Paul. Rand Paul, had somebody investigate. Turns out that Weber Shandwick, and this was discovered through emails and little messages through LinkedIn. Weber Shandwick had an embedded marketing unit within the offices of the vaccine division at the CDC. And in fact, the CDC had paid Weber Shandwick over $50 million. So we have a situation, we have a PR marketing firm for two big pharma companies now that are working hand in glove with the American Board of Internal Medicine on, quote, misinformation. And they're actually in our government offices promoting Pfizer and Moderna. I was always wondering, why is Pfizer and Moderna always featured in all the CDC and government statements, and why not Johnson & Johnson and Novavax? And I think now we know.
It is again, extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, and it's kind of fascinating that we are actually getting the evidence. This is normally something that takes decades and exhaustive investigative journalism to finally flesh out that there is 30 years in hindsight that there was a conflict of interest. It's pretty fascinating that January 20th, 2023, we're getting the receipts. I mean, the Twitter files, for one, we're seeing the DHS, the CDC, notably the FBI. Why is the DOJ involved with vaccine rollout? But I think yesterday, and I didn't look as closely into it as I probably should have, so take this with a grain of salt, whoever's listening, but apparently there is the beginning of what's being called Facebook files about vaccine rollout and controlling of the flow of information on Instagram and Facebook, both subsidiaries of Meta. So again, extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, so we have to hold on every other social media company. But I think at this point, it's starting to look like we almost need receipts to see which companies aren't involved, or you could even say infiltrated by these things. But yeah, I mean, we all have our assumptions, and yeah, now it's very clear. Why is the CDC, or why is Pfizer and Moderna always involved with these? Well, as you just said, there's an embedded unit in there, and it's the definition of a captured institution, I think.
It's true, Tommy, and it's not fair. A lot of my patients have asked me, Dr. McCullough, what's the best vaccine? Are there any comparative data? What's the safest vaccine? And our CDC, we're 2 years into this vaccine campaign, and our CDC hasn't given any comparative framework for Americans. Neither have employers, schools, or the military. This is America, and these are all government provided. They're all free. Well, why would they just say take any vaccine? Why wouldn't there at this point in time be some guidance? There ought to be, some narrowing of the field theoretically. And I always held out a lot of hope for the Novavax vaccine, which is 5 micrograms of purified Wuhan spike protein made through an insect moth model, so a production model that uses that pathway. No genetics, no messenger RNA, no adenoviral DNA. And everything I see about Novavax, I still think it's safer than the other products. I mean, there has been a case of myocarditis reported from Asia. I looked at the case carefully. It was very mild. It didn't involve sudden death and the other things that we're seeing. In the briefing book for Novavax, they clearly disclosed they had some blood clots. There was a few cases of myocarditis, but at least they were honest about it. With Pfizer and Moderna, we just didn't hear about these things, and now we've been clobbered with thousands of cases of myocarditis, almost a new case of sudden death every day. And now recently our FDA has come out and said, well, yeah, messenger RNA vaccines, they also cause blood clots.
I've had him on here before, and I know you've chatted with him with me. Investigative journalist George Webb got the adenoviral or adenovirus, the attenuated adenovirus, Johnson & Johnson, I think. He has developed myocarditis. He told me that on a podcast not a week ago, that he went and got a test and tested positive for, I guess, all 3 markers of myocarditis. So it seemed like even that is more of an illusion of choice.
It's true. In a paper by Patone and colleagues published in Circulation, our best cardiology journal, Patone is describing now 100 fatal cases of myocarditis. About half are messenger RNA, that is Pfizer and Moderna, and about half are adenoviral DNA, the former AstraZeneca product, which has now been retired. AstraZeneca and Johnson & Johnson are very similar. They're made by the same company called Emergent Biosolutions. They're actually not made by the pharmaceutical companies. A lot of people think that big pharma is making these. It's not. The big pharma is like a marketing shield. The money goes to big pharma, and then it goes out to U.S. defense contractors. And for Janssen, it's made by Emergent Biosolutions outside of Baltimore. For Moderna, for example, it's made by a company called Resilience. So there's a lot going on. You've seen a lot of disclosures and analyses today in the Iron Will report. Iron Will, he's kind of like a Tommy Carrigan, but he's up in Canada. He wears kind of like a Inspector Clouseau hat. He's quite a character. But Iron Will interviewed Sasha Latypova, as an independent pharmaceutical company analyst. You may have had her on. And she's outlined that, the terms that are used by our government are military terms, that this is considered a national security operation. In all the government language, they use the term countermeasures. Countermeasures is a military term. So there's actually, military threats and countermeasures, biological threats, countermeasures. And now that we learn that the vaccines are actually made by defense contractors, and that the vaccines were rolled out under HHS and the Department of Defense. And now we understand the intelligence community, namely FBI, was in Twitter. I'm told something like 80 some FBI officers, either in Twitter or now working for Twitter, and now moving over to Facebook. And I think when they pull the Tommy Carrigan files in YouTube, they'll find out there was an FBI agent that was zeroing in on Dr. McCullough as I bring America the truth. The thing I think must drive them crazy, Tommy, is that I cite all the information. I simply just give it. It's right there. And there's never any dispute. I've actually never had anybody who's qualified ever dispute what I say, because we could sit down and look at the paper. So if the dispute was, well, I disagree with this citation, I say, well, let's sit down and look at it, and nobody wants to go there.
Well, that is kind of that nagging thorn in the side that is the truth. What's that ancient proverb? 3 things cannot long be hidden: the sun, the moon, and the truth. It'll get you, I'm sure 500 years ago the aristocracy would have loved Weber Shandwick to get all those astronomers to shut up about the Copernican model, and that the Earth could potentially not be flat, and that we might not be the center of the universe. And they were a little more heavy-handed back then. They didn't shadow ban you. They tied you to a pole and lit you on fire in the town square. But given enough time, like an acid, the truth will dissolve the very container trying to hold it. And I've thought about that. As an aside, I would love to get like a file on my podcast one day. If I could get like an FBI letterhead file, I would frame that and put it right on the flag. I would love
Tommy, about this time last year, I had a wonderful trip to central Louisiana, outside Baton Rouge. And I went to the Tabernacle Life Church in central Louisiana. I actually went to the parsonage of famed Pastor Tony Spell. And let me tell you, Tony Spell is quite a man. He's handsome. His father's is a preacher, an evangelical preacher, a wonderful family, right in his parsonage. Met his wife, sat down and had a cup of coffee. And Tony Spell walked me into his office, and he showed me his certificates of imprisonment, that he had been put in prison because he would not close his church during these draconian lockdowns. They had left Walmart open down the street and the liquor store, but they were shutting down the Tabernacle Life Church. Beautiful church. I was in it. And, he went to church wearing a suit and tie, had a little flower in his lapel, and he was singing hymns the entire time. He's quite a man. He sung on stage about how he'd been to jail and he's not going back. And he sung it with soul, Tommy. These are things that we'll never forget in the course of our lifetime. We'll just never forget these events as they come forward. We don't need hobbies right now. The news cycle is so brisk with information. You're talking about files dropping and finding out intelligence community and government operatives. I was stunned to learn about the COVID Community Corps, and it's right on their website. President Biden and HHS in 2021, create a website. It's called wecandothis.org. COVID Community Corps, Tommy, $13 billion unaccounted for, $13 billion of federal money flow to over 4,000 media outlets, community groups, the Screen Actors Guild, Hollywood, sports teams, notably the NFL. The NFL takes our taxpayer dollars all to push and then later on mandate these vaccines.
About breaking the lockdowns and the certificate of imprisonment. I mean, we just had MLK Day, and like so quickly we're forgetting about the FBI sending a letter to Martin Luther King Jr. telling him he had 34 days to kill himself. The FBI, not a white supremacist or potentially a white supremacist, but the FBI on this, on the same day we're unveiling a statue to him, well deserved. He's a heroic figure that stood up to the face of power and spoke truth to power. The very institutions that we're applauding because they know best and they're fighting misinformation. Hey man, 50 years ago it was misinformation to say that that we shouldn't use separate water fountains. Time will judge you harshly. Time does not care, nor does the truth. And I think we need to perhaps keep that in mind.
Well, let me just respond to that. Last weekend, I had a chance to spend a retreat of sorts with the Seventh-day Adventist Church, actually Andrew's ministry in Berrien Springs, Michigan. It's a rare visit to Western Michigan this time of year where there isn't, 4 feet of snow on the ground, Tommy. I was amazed. I went out jogging and it was snow-free and comfortable. But what I learned there, an incredible lecture, it's actually available online by Dr. Conrad Vine, probably one of the most astute, not only biblical scholars, but just, scholars of modern history. And he pointed out in his lecture, and the lecture really had to do with what's called a Marxist ideology. A Marxist ideology means a way of thinking that is totalitarian and clearly uses authoritarian measures to make it happen. And so he points out, as the reformers were, reforming and beginning to read the Bible and make the Bible available to parishioners who wanted to learn and to break away from the Roman Catholic Church, the papacy. They were apostate, if you will. Huss and John Knox and others. He points out that 500 years ago at Oxford University, they burned people at the stake. They burned people at the stake 500 years ago. Now, 100 years ago, Stalin created a man-made famine in the Ukraine. And in order to create a sense of fear and compliance and control, the kulaks, he had put them under such incredible pressure, not only death by famine, death by firing squad, losing everything that one has, their jobs, their independence, what have you. That was 100 years ago, Tommy, 100 years ago. And now today, we have a group of essentially oligarchs flying in private jets all over the world to Davos, Switzerland. And it's a conglomeration, actually a meeting of not only heads of state, but some people are congressmen. And then there's wealthy billionaires and pharmaceutical CEOs, and then press. And here they are at the World Economic Forum. And they're not talking about, economic disparities. They're not talking about recessionary indicators or currency valuations, worldwide stock markets. They're actually talking about, gene editing, transhumanism, genetic alteration of the human genome, repeated vaccines. I mean, there are people, I saw a clip yesterday from former barrister, prime minister, and diplomat Tony Blair, where he was so enthralled with repeated injections of messenger RNA. It almost looked like he just wanted to just take an injection every 5 minutes. He was so pumped up with this genetic fervor. It was incredible, like as if this was going to solve the world's problem. People preoccupied with climate change. I saw a clip by former Vice President Al Gore, who's really aged over time. I have to comment. And he's always been an enthusiast for climate change, but he was unhinged. He just looked like he had lost his marbles over, a few years of a trend on temperature. Obviously the earth has been much hotter, much colder at different times.
Sure.
It almost seems like Davos, Tommy, people have lost their minds, yet they're in positions of power.
Yeah, it seems to be a further, and you always see someone that quote unquote makes it, a comedian or an artist or a rapper or something, and as they make more money, you start to go, oh, they're detached. Like, have you ever seen like an old interview with an up and coming music artist, and then you see them 5 years later after they've made it and they're living in a mansion and they've got a Bentley made of gold, and you hear them talking, you're like, oh, they've kind of detached from reality, which on one hand is like, that means they've made it. But on the other hand, you hear him talking about like people should stop complaining. You're like, oh, this guy doesn't have to work anymore. It's that times a trillion. They've completely untethered themselves. They're a hot air balloon with no heat valve. They've gone into the exosphere, and they're so removed that it is what isn't there like a psychological or psychiatric or neurological term, duper's delight, when you get away with a lie. It's there's like a dopamine rush. Yeah, there are fascinating videos of people who later it was proven that they were lying under like oath or something, and it's an involuntary action. It's like a micro expression. Malcolm Gladwell talked about it in his book Blink that I read like 20 years ago. These involuntary things, kind of no different than a hiccup, which basically it's like a truth serum. It's written on your face. And one of the
Tommy,
things,
I know you got into medical school, so you know a lot, and understand a lot. The one thing you'd understand in psychology, is stonewalling, and boy, did we see that this week, with CEO Albert Bourla,
at Davos, right?
right, of Pfizer. He was on the streets of Davos, which looked okay. It looked like streets of Park City. I'd probably rather be in Park City, honestly, or in Colorado. But he's on the streets of Davos, and he's trying to get to his place. And then these two dogged reporters. It was great because they must have had one guy ahead of him filming him, two guys with a microphone, and he didn't have much in the way of security. He had this woman who just wasn't able to fend him off. So they kept asking him questions. Well, how come when you didn't know about transmission and going on? And he goes, well, have a nice day. No comment. And then he doesn't say anything. And he keeps looking for a door and he can't find one. And they keep ushering him around. And this video goes on. And I tweeted out, I said, God, that must have been the longest walk of his life. This guy was being asked some hard questions. It was clear he's absolutely stonewalling the world on safety. If this guy was any good at all, he'd just sit down and say, listen, let's just have a press conference. I'll ask you your question. I'll answer your questions the best I can. I'll get some Pfizer scientists. I mean, there's just no honesty here, no transparency. He just looked guilty as sin. And the rest of the world is saying, listen, I got to take these vaccines. And this guy is the CEO and he's not even going to answer any questions. I do find it interesting. You have Moderna and Pfizer, two U.S. companies. Why do we need CEOs with kind of spy-like international accents?
Yeah,
It's just not needed, Tommy. There's a lot of talent in the United States. We don't need some guy with a French accent or some guy with a a Serbian accent. I mean, come on. I just think that these companies put on such a facade. And now they're just a flat out stonewalling. America is furious.
There's something about people with the right intention who are doing more damage than good. And you can always tell when someone truly has the best of intentions because they will tell you. And that's when you can maybe poke holes in the logic and sort of get them to, wake up to their own psychosis. If if your best friend's pulling you at a bar because you've had way too much to drink, He's not lying to you. He's saying, hey, dude, you're way too drunk. You're starting to fight. You're trying to text your ex-girlfriend. I'm going to bring you home. You're telling him what your intentions are. When someone wants to push these vaccines into the arms of every man, woman, and child on the planet, but then they don't take questions and it's all behind a cloak of secrecy. I mean, there's really only a couple branches of potential answers. It's either that they don't have the best of intentions and that they know they're BSing you, or if we want to go back to the military terminology that we were talking about earlier, attack, countermeasure, rollout, you would then maybe argue it's classified. Well, then why is it classified? And I don't think it's classification. But if there is a mixture between the military rollout, if these things are made by defense contractors, that
It's true,
doesn't.
Tommy. Tommy, I just located, and of course, you're right again. I mean, your audience, the Tommy Carrigan podcast, TPC, it's right here. Is called "Beware the Duper's Delight."
It's like a little, it's like a little
it's
smirk.
also known as the cheater's high.
Uh-huh.
And the example is someone who cheats in a card game, that
Yeah.
they kind of get a
You get a little
thrill.
wiggle. You'll see it in poker people. Yeah.
Yeah, they just they get away with one. But in this case, we're either talking about national security, we're talking about people's health. Recently I was just in Washington and I did some filming, and I was at a building, and I went up to the floor where the going to meet my team, and they said, "Listen, here's the office where they just got the classified documents that Biden was holding in one of his think tank rooms." And of course, there was a lot of buzz. There was a lot of Republican buzz, like, "Aha, we've got him. He had some documents." It turns out that virtually everybody in Washington is using private emails or using government emails. They have documents here and there and all over the place. And I have a feeling, Tommy, that we're beyond these "I gotcha" moments, right?
Yeah, that's done.
Do you remember, a few years ago, there was the Steele dossier, and there was a Russian collusion documents, and the hyperbole. Now, I'm a frequent contributor on Fox, but I can take a little knock on Fox. I remember Sean Hannity saying that this is one of the most important documents in American history. And I looked at my wife. I said, "Good Lord. I mean, really, does he really think that this is up with the Declaration of Independence and the U.S. Constitution?" I mean, the hyperbole, this idea of, aha, we found a laptop, or we found some hidden documents. And once America knows, everything is going to unravel. It's not working that way anymore. Yeah, honestly, I think Trump changed all the parameters. They kept ushering out one woman after another. Aha! If it's just one more woman, Trump is gonna come crashing down. It obviously didn't happen. The only recent example where some type of aha brought somebody down was former New York Governor Andrew Cuomo. Right what was really going on, we think, and it's in our book, Courage to Face COVID-19. John Leake wrote a chapter called Cuomo-sexuals. You got to get the book and read Cuomo-sexuals. Yeah, it's actually a real term. It turns out that what they had done is New York State had adopted a policy that the nursing homes couldn't refuse a transfer in of a COVID positive patient. And so they had these sick COVID patients. This was in 2020. It was really just an awful time in New York. And there were sick COVID patients, maybe not enough beds, or they in the ER, they didn't think they were sick enough to admit it. So they actually just shipped them back to the nursing home, and they spread more COVID. This was well documented. And so as the public outrage was welling up against the New York State, health authorities and Cuomo. Cuomo had, by the way, had already won an Emmy for all his press conferences and his command and control of what's going on in New York. So what happened suddenly is people brought up the issue of some type of inappropriate sexual harassment in the past. Like, where did this come from? After an Emmy and all of this, and suddenly he was ushered in, and quickly he fell from grace. And as collateral damage, Tommy, so did his brother, pumped up Chris Cuomo on CNN. I used to like to watch Chris, particularly in the incredible hurricanes. I don't know if you know the hurricane. Chris Cuomo pumped so much weight, he would put on some type of Gore-Tex CNN jacket, and he'd go out in the hurricane with wind blowing about 90 miles an hour, and he could withstand it. And he was holding the mic and getting pelted with these raindrops. And he would, he would report on the
Oh yeah.
hurricane. It was tremendous. But as collateral damage, Chris Cuomo went down as well. And that's all embodied in our book, Courage to Face COVID-19, under the chapter of Cuomo-sexuals. But that's the most recent example. It doesn't happen anymore. Do you remember when Elliot Spitzer went down and John Kerry, not John Kerry, but the person who ran for president, who is that, who went down with an
McCain?
affair? And then
McCain.
there was, it kept going and going. It was one person after another. Gary Hart, when he
Herman Cain, they took him down with an assault.
Right. So normally it's some type of honey trap or sexual harassment allegation. But I think Trump broke all the rules, because even when all this came out, I'll never forget when the Catholic Church said, one of the people pretty high up in the Catholic Church said, listen, we're going to give Trump a mulligan. What's a mulligan? I had to look it up. I'm Protestant Irish, not Catholic Irish. I looked up a mulligan. I said, oh my gosh, it just basically says we're going to give him a free pass, that for him it doesn't count. So I think Trump broke all the rules, and America is beyond this aha thing. It's not like one little thing now, that we have to focus on big things. And what I'm saying is a big thing right now is a public health crisis on sudden cardiac death.
You almost have to wonder if it's, if things are by design or if they arise organically and then someone hijacks those movements. They're very hard to discern. Was someone a plant from early on, or did they grow an organic base and then they got paid money or blackmailed to push a message? They're very hard to pull apart. But you almost have to wonder if there is a design to this, if we are moving towards some form of hyper normalization where nothing matters anymore. There is no gotcha big enough. As you move from drug to drug, you go to heavier and heavier drugs because you can't get the same high. As you make more and more money, it's not enough to have a Lamborghini. You got to have a penthouse. You got to have a plane. You got to have 5 planes. You got to own a senator. You got to have an island. You get that these trends go throughout human history. You almost have to start to think, is this a form of hypernormalization to cloud the waters of drama and tragedy and gotcha moments, to where everyone wants to, even gate doesn't matter anymore. Watergate, we've had so many gates, from sports to politics to business. It doesn't matter anymore, right? If someone called it Biden gate, no one would even care. And then, because no one cares, you have to wonder, well, why do these things still kind of work sometimes to take down the Cuomos? Why are they finding Biden docs now? And maybe I've just become cynical and kind of hardened, but I look at it now and I'm like, I don't even think this is a gotcha for the Republicans. I'm looking at it now. I'm like, I think this is probably whoever the handlers of Biden are. They're deactivating him. They're magically now, kind of around January 20th, the 2-year mark, they're kind of finding documents in multiple places. It just, maybe it's Providence. I don't know, but it just.
Tommy, this office wasn't hard to find. I literally went into the front of the building. I gave him my name. I'm saying, I'm going up to this floor. I signed in, and they took a picture of my, my driver's license. I got a little ID badge. I went up. I met my person. They go, look at, and there was a big glass door and glass windows. You could look in and see everything inside. That's where they found the documents. And I said, wow, that wasn't too hard to find. I mean,
but that's what I mean is, in Russ Baker's, I think it's Family of Secrets, and David Talbot's The Devil's Chessboard. I think it was Family of Secrets, where they talk about the Nixon, the Watergate burglary. And it looks like a third rate. It looks like if you and I did a burglary, right? I do podcasts. You're a doctor. If you and I did a burglary, it would be very apparent that we hadn't done this before, right? We'd be slipping up. Our faces would be on camera. We'd be leaving fingerprints anywhere. We'd be idiots. The guys that did it, the team is called the Plumbers. These were all former CIA operatives who had done this stuff before. I'm friends with CIA not analysts, the actual black ops guys. If they did a job and left shell casings or footprints, that was intentional. You're leaving fingerprints. The plumbers, it has been I think argued well by Russ Baker that this was designed to take Nixon down. It was a third-rate burglary to make it look like him. So when it's something like you just look in there and here's the office, again, maybe I'm just cynical, but the hairs on my neck start to go up. I'm like, they button this stuff up well. There's a reason it's coming out. Um, and to do a complete 180, um, one thing I do love about this show, and one thing I do pride myself on, and I pride my guests on, is the ability to argue the devil's advocate position, to take an opposition to ourselves, so as not to pigeonhole ourselves into an echo chamber. And I meant to say this like 30 minutes ago, so this is a bit of an abrupt turn. To go back to the defense contractors, emergent solutions and resilience and or biological, whatever it was, designing these things. Is that's not really like a gotcha thing though, right? This isn't new. Pharma does they farm this stuff out, no pun intended, to like contractors. Is that correct? Like Apple
Yeah,
uses like 1,000 subcontractors.
right. So most of the pharmaceutical companies are, in a sense, just marketing companies. They farm out the clinical development, even a lot of the basic research now. But with respect to the vaccines, though, this is in the open. And this was simply just clicking a few times on the internet, Tommy. If we click on the BARDA website
Mm-hmm.
and then just look for Adept Protect, it's called Pandemic Prevention Platform P3.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this is on the DARPA website, and it shows a diagram where there's a virus, and they grow the virus, they make an antibody to the virus, they evolve the antibody, they create the nucleic acid coding for the antibody, and then they make messenger RNA and then inject that back into the body. They show the life cycle of this, and it says on the right-hand side of the screen, in 2012, with the Adept Protect program, DARPA began investing. In 2012, they began investing in the development of gene-encoded vaccines, a new category of preventive measures based on DNA or RNA. And in this approach, genes that encode for immune-stimulating antigens, such as the spike proteins on the surface of viruses, like the one SARS-CoV-2 that causes COVID-19, are delivered directly to a recipient's body. There, the instructions are given for the body to develop immunity against it. And the goal of this, Tommy, is to end pandemics in 60 days. This is Department of Defense, United States of America, DARPA. So this is, this is in the open. I'm just disappointed I didn't know it the day that President Trump came out and said, we're going to have Operation Warp Speed and we're going to bring these vaccines forward. I wish I just would have clicked on the website to realize that it wasn't Warp Speed at all, that DARPA was working on this since 2012. What was going to be Warp Speed was testing it in adult populations with COVID. That part was going to be Warp Speed, but it would have been more honest to portray it as it was and to say, listen, we've been working on this. We've been kind of getting ready if this happened, and this is what we've got. And anybody can click on the website and see it. So one of the things I've found out, Tommy, is that everything seems to be in the open. We're not finding any new hidden documents. It's just new things we learn by just being pointed somewhere on the internet.
And then you have to wonder about the psychological side effect of, or not side effect, the psychological aspect of all of this. It doesn't just seem to be now also with devil's advocacy, to go back and let's defend the current and the former administration. If they're using military terms, this might have, maybe they're privy to intelligence that we don't know. Maybe this was a form of biowarfare instigated by another nation state. I have no idea. Maybe they did view this no different than economic warfare. In 2008, the head of the Russian economic department went to, I think, the head of the Chinese economic department and said, hey, how about we How about we dump all our U.S. Treasury bonds on them at the same time during the housing crisis to bring them to their knees? Like that was seen as a national security threat. They might have viewed this as a national security threat, and I'm willing to at least exercise that mental limberness to say maybe they viewed this as a national security threat, and that's why it was they use military terms. I don't know, but when you see the psychological aspect to this, I think there was a flow chart one that came out in the Twitter files, and it was how to it was like the different levels and the moves and counter moves uh to how to counteract people who had vaccine hesitancy. And there's like several stages. There's like I'll have to find it. There's like a color chart, like green, yellow, orange, red, kind of all these different. And it starts with trust the science and point towards familiar figures, and then it starts going in. I think they even say as you get into like yellow and orange, to start using gaslighting. Like, do you not want society to get better? Accuse them of racism, that they want a disproportional amount of lower income people to be affected by it. And this is like an actual flow chart from I'll have to find it because I don't want to just not have the receipts. There seems to be a very military style psychological operation to this, like a very real thing that it makes it harder and harder to defend them. And I think there is something to that you don't use this just to roll something out like this. There seems to be something more nefarious. And again, when you see almost the duper's delight, if you will, that sort of willy-nilly glee you're seeing from these individuals at Davos, man, it's all pointing to something nefarious.
Well, Tommy, it's either that or it's just pointing to good planning. I mean, here's another
Sure.
thing to look at. The Pandemic and All Hazards Preparedness Reauthorization Act, PAPRA. It's Law 113.5. Just reading from the website. It was enacted March 13th, 2013. 2013. And it provides emergency use of new products and emergencies according to the definitions of covered countermeasures, and outlines, our goals to have pandemic preparedness. And this is part of what's called the PrEP Act. The PrEP Act is the larger act on it's a Public Readiness and Emergency Preparedness Act. Now, I'm just on the government website. Anybody can go here, the PrEP Act, and look at under the PrEP Act what is being covered: smallpox, monkeypox, other orthopox viruses, Marburg virus and Marburg disease, Ebola, nerve agents and insecticides, Zika virus, pandemic influenza, anthrax, and acute radiation syndrome. I have to tell you, Tommy, our government, DARPA through the military, BARDA through the NIH, all these related agencies, we are knee deep into research, development, measures, countermeasures on biological threats to the population, knee deep. And we've been in it easily for a decade.
And DARPA, for anyone that's unaware of any, there's a great book called the Pentagon's Brain, DARPA, by Annie Jacobson. Annie Jacobson is the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency. This is the bleeding edge of the bleeding edge. It is the classified to the classified. It is the stuff that creates ideas and pawns them off to the classified sub facilities of Northrop Grumman, to Boeing, to Lockheed Martin, Skunk Works, Phantom Works, all these compartments within compartments. They don't get involved in lower tier things. They don't get involved in the development of tanks and guns. They are at the bleeding edge. They're the ones that pioneered the internet in the 50s. They're the ones that spearheaded the first ENIAC and MANIAC computers under John von Neumann to create the thermonuclear bomb. They are at the bleed. They are often called the wizards of warfare, the Imagineers of war. The Wizards of the Apocalypse. They have all these names. They're originally called the Jason Scientists. You don't pull them out for if I If I get pulled over, it's a local police officer. If a black SUV rolls up and Delta Force gets out, something's gone horribly wrong. DARPA doesn't get involved with stuff for us peons. Something's very wrong that they are spearheading this program 10 years prior to this rollout.
Tommy, you're exactly right. I'm on the DARPA website. Everyone ought to go there. It's really cool. It says creating breakthrough technologies and capabilities for national security. And the DARPA communities, they say DARPA's success depends on the vibrant ecosystem of innovation within the agency operates and is fueled by partners in multiple sectors. They list universities, industry, small business, government, public, and media. Why would DARPA have any interest in the media? Tommy, it's in the wide open. You look at under research, they list coronavirus response as the top thing they're doing. Fundamental research in the seeds of surprise, the voices of DARPA and our programs. This is, they have their own podcast, Voices from DARPA podcast, opens up a revealing window into the minds of DARPA program managers who discuss informal and personal terms why they are at DARPA and what they're doing. They have a huge campaign on artificial intelligence, Tommy, artificial intelligence. And then they list project after project with doctors who are in charge of this, all different types of things. Here's a project, active social engineering defense. Social engineering defense. Here's one, adapting cross-domain kill webs technology. DARPA is deep into, Tommy, this kind of fourth dimension, fifth dimension warfare.
Again, I can't stress this enough. I mean, there are defense contractors, Northrop Grumman, Boeing, General Dynamics. There are the black sectors of those defense contractors, Skunk Works under Lockheed Martin, Phantom Works, I believe, is in Boeing. They have these things. Beyond that is DARPA. I cannot stress this enough. There is DARPA, created under General Eisenhower. Their original mission statement, I think you read one, and I guess that's their new brushed up one that's a little more semantically appealing. Their original mission statement to, quote, create the vast weapon systems of tomorrow. They don't they don't get involved. They do not get involved. If Tom Brady's showing up to your Little League game, something's going wrong. He's not supposed to be there. He's supposed to throw lasers on the field. Nothing good's coming if he's putting on your Pop Warner League jersey. So the vast weapon systems of tomorrow, and you read my mind about the social media, the psychological, the media infiltration. There is another agency that you can find almost nothing about. Truly, you can find almost investigative journalist Annie Jacobson, as well as author James Bamford, who wrote the book Shadow Factory, the post 9/11 ultra secret NSA, which came out in like 2003. They both barely brush on it. Something called IARPA, the Intelligence Advanced Research Projects Agency. You can find almost nothing on it. I would love to see you do a deep dive on it. You can find lectures on YouTube. IARPA is the AI DARPA. It is a breakaway from DARPA, if you can even imagine that level of compartmentalization and advancement. I
Boy,
don't
Tommy,
get warm and fuzzy feelings.
Tommy, I feel like you and I are characters in a Tom Clancy novel. IARPA, the Intelligence Advanced Research Projects Agency,
No
Office.
books.
It's Office of the Director of National Intelligence, creating advantage through research and technology. This is astonishing. And guess what's up on their banner? Tommy, they've got 5 things. COVID-19 research. What is IARPA doing with intelligence research? It's right on their website. I mean, you can't make this stuff up. We have a situation where something's gone desperately wrong in our country, and our government is knee deep into things now that you would only see on a James Bond movie or in some other type of entertainment. Instead, it's not entertainment. It's our lives, and it's our jobs, and it's our bodies, basically. We have this now, I think, nearly a fanatical meeting in World Economic Forum, which seems to have nothing to do with economics and everything to do with science fiction.
Well, yeah, I mean, they changed the name from the Department of War to the Department of Defense. It is all about PR. It ain't nothing to do with the World Economic Forum. Those are simply letters and words that you and I recognize. I mean, yeah, and you know what? Nazi chemist Otto Ambros also called the Holocaust cultural cleansing. They like to dance around with words, so I wouldn't give it any credence.
Tommy, we're gonna have to leave it here.
Sure.
I'm gonna have to make a change here,
Yes, sir.
but it's great that we weren't just all on the virus and the spike protein, that we talked more broadly about some of these developments again that are just in the open. You're so knowledgeable. I think you're up there with one of the absolutely the top podcasters that just bring so much to the table in terms of your deep historical knowledge, and also you're so widely read. So great to be on your program again.
Absolutely. I love having you on. I'll send you some books. I would love to see you do a deep dive on IARPA. Yeah, it is I just to go on what you just said, to not just focus on the viruses. I think in a way we did, much in the same way that if you find the toe, if an archaeologist finds a toe and they keep brushing, and then they find an ankle, and then they find a knee, and they go, "What is this?" And then they think they're looking at a human, and a year later they've excavated 100 yards and they found a Tyrannosaurus Rex. When you find the toe, you think you just found a toe. You don't think that you found a whole new chapter of history.
Yeah.
It starts with spike proteins. It ends with IARPA.
Man. You nailed it. Yeah. I mean, that's a great visual, and it's part of something bigger. It's part of something just what we talked about today, Tommy. It's absolutely rock solid documented that this has been going on for years, this kind of thinking. There are laws in place. There's been acts. There's been legislation. There's been preparedness for this, and we're living it out. Each day seems to be a new challenge. Thank you so much for having me on the program.
Dr. McCullough, thank you so much, guys. Go follow his Twitter, his Getter, his Gab, his Truth, his Substack. His book will be in the description. You can go grab it on Audible. It's a great read. Go listen to all his other interviews. He's been on this show, I think, 20 times. You can just search him through. And yeah, Dr. McCullough, thank you so much.
We'll see
As
you later.
always, God bless.
Bye-bye.
Stay